We've had a lot of the same DNA from when we were quadrupedal to bipedal. So do you think running is the ultimate goal of our DNA? When we were quadrupedal, why didn't we get up on 2 feet and start running? Because our anatomy didn't select for that. That's not what emerged. If you're on 4 legs, it makes more sense to run like a 4-legged animal. But when your anatomy changes based on the environment, and we start coming upright because we need the ability to take objects and throw or look at our horizon, this is not a perfect way to be. It's just the way we evolved to be. So if you're telling me walking was somehow programmed, you have to show me how the species just before us, like chimpanzees and all these, you got to show me why they don't emerge with walking. Is their DNA not very similar? So in other words, you emerge the pattern based on the anatomy, not based on a preconceived program that was predetermined in your brain. It's a dynamic system that is learning its way around, and the way it learns, the filter that you use to learn movements with, when you're going through the natural selection process of learning a skill, that's what it is. You learn how to throw a front kick. The first time you do it, it looks like hell. You never score. As it starts to look better and you get enforcement from your instructor, that was the one. Good pivot. That's where your foot should be. Put your arm back. Whatever it is. Then you start scoring that front kick on people. You start to select for the way you did it. Now, the filter that you use to learn these things is your afference. That's the only way you can learn. You're getting instruction, you're getting visual feedback, auditory feedback, and then you're getting afference. So if you want to select for really, really effective movement patterns, it's based on the health and intelligence of your joints. If your joints tell your brain good, quality, up-to-date information, then you will filter out bad and you will keep good patterning. If your joints are not working well and your brain is not getting accurate, up-to-date information from the mechanical receptors whose job it is to tell your brain what's actually going on, then you're not going to select as well. Your movement patterns will be less effective, and if your joints are restricted, you'll have less degrees of freedom to deal with variables whilst in the motions that you're creating. So what is your job? Your job is not to assess movement. Your job is to improve how movement is selected for. Your job is to improve the filters. And the filters are afferents coming from your joints and the surrounding stuff that makes your joints. So when we're assessing now, I don't care what you're doing on that side. Whatever you're patternizing, the right side of the training scheme, the attention has to be at the tools, maintaining the tools, sharpening the tools. The tools are anti-fragile like the rest of your body, meaning you can adapt them to get better. So what's better? Well, if you have ranges of motion, do you not think it's a good idea to be able to control those ranges? So real evidence-staunch people will say, well, passive range of motion doesn't lead to decreased injury. And I've heard people say that, you can work on your active range of motion, but there's no research out there to demonstrate that active to passive ratio. What research do you need? When you put force into the body, if the force exceeds the ability to absorb force, then the force exceeds the ability to absorb force. So it yields and tears and rips. So if you have a 180-degree split and you can only move your leg 90 degrees, that means there's 90 degrees of which you have very little experience in. And if you have little experience in, the volume of training you've put into that 90 degrees is very low. And if the volume of training you've put into the 90 degrees is very low, chances are the strength in that 90 degrees is not as good as in the strength of the 90 degrees that you can control. And if the strength is less in that remaining 90 degrees, then you're going to absorb less force in that 90 degrees. Ergo, that area is under a higher chance of getting injured if you move into that area and a variable comes at you that you can't absorb or deal with. That's why I'm not assessing movements. That's why I'm not trying to assess your patterns. I'm not stereotyping patterns. I like this pattern, I don't like that pattern. The pattern happens whether you're there or not. The only thing you have access to is making the filter better. So all I said yesterday was when people come in, instead of assessing their patterns, assess their tools. Now what's the best way to assess the tools? Ask them to demonstrate the utilization of the tool. So shoulder. What can you do with your shoulder? Like, just show me what you're capable of doing, and then I'll know what you're incapable of. And then as long as your programming sticks within those parameters, you have a less chance of hurting yourself.